And welcome to the Northland Sports Page. Happy Saturday. It is a relatively cloudy Saturday, but all signs pointing to nicer weather ahead. Sunny days outside, hopefully sunny days inside too, because, gentlemen, as it's Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis, supposedly we're getting closer to some form of life as we once knew it.
Yeah, it looks that way. It was good to see the governor kind of walk us through what his plans were as far as opening up the state. That was actually a pretty cool press conference. I thought the governor did pretty well. But Dana had her surgery yesterday, so I know that the hospitals are starting to open up a little bit, and maybe some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah, exactly. I think just starting to slowly roll things out a little bit is important. Having the time to put in the proper measures to make sure everyone's staying safe rather than jumping right into anything right away, I think was a good call. It's a difficult position to be in, obviously, for the governor. You don't envy him trying to decide what's going to operate and what's not, and at what capacity, and what taking the economy versus people's safety. It's a difficult spot to be in, but trying to do the best they can on any given day based off the information we're given.
Absolutely, and I think that's the difficult part. It is a tough decision to make, and what might be even tougher is letting the people decide. It's the right thing to do, but how smart are you going to be on this, and what is smart? Minnesota is going to gradually open Monday, open a little bit further June 1st. Wisconsin is letting it ride, good, bad, or indifferent. It's a little strange, but you have to do what's right for you. Is that fair to say?
It is kind of funny to see the YOLO that Wisconsin's doing, though. I mean, if they ran their football program like they run their opening of after COVID, they'd be in the ground. I just they're like all over the place. But yeah, I do think that that balance between economy and safety is a fine line to walk. I mean, you could potentially have as many deaths on one as you do on the other, but I thought the governor did pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't know what the correct answer is right now. This is going to be an interesting case study in 20, 30 years when we're able to look back and see how everything really shakes out as far as people's health, as well as the economy and people's ability to make a living. So it's interesting to see the different tacks that are being taken in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is an interesting legal study a little bit too, actually, because the reason that was struck down has nothing to do with the governor. It's because they did something different than Minnesota did in the first place.
Right.
They went through the Department of Health to have that put on, and they got struck down on technicality, saying the Department of Health can't have you have a stay-at-home order. They didn't say a governor couldn't do it. So it's an interesting situation going on there in Wisconsin.
Well, and then I have to ask.
Angeles.
I have to ask the attorney this. Sorry, we'll let Dave get to Los Angeles in a second. I want to keep it local with Wisconsin in just a few minutes here. But I have to ask the attorney this because the Supreme Court helped Wisconsin get to where it is. However, they met virtually out of what they felt was necessity. So they didn't want to get together to make the decision that it was okay to get together. Normally, this show, as it's the Northland Sports Page here on your Saturday, stays out of a political lane. Well, let me dive in for a second because I've got a legal expert on my panel. I'm not going to ask for your right or wrong on that. What I want to know is just your thought on that because I know it raised a few eyebrows.
Well, there's a lot of eyebrows being raised about it. And I think part of it as well is that even though the Supreme Court struck down the stay-at-home order that was put out by the Wisconsin Department of Health specifically, and they are still not opening the courthouses in the state of Wisconsin. So they're not holding any court hearings or anything like that still. That's their decision with their specific department. So they're still taking precautions to protect people within their buildings and their employees and things like that. But they struck it down strictly on a technicality that it was the Department of Health that put it out as opposed to the governor and his executive powers. They were saying that specific branch couldn't do that, have that big overreach. So it's interesting. I mean, in theory, Governor Evers in Wisconsin could come out today and put out a new stay-at-home order himself and have that get tested. But he's decided to, politically stay out of it for now. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
All right, Dave, bring LA into the mix. I know you wanted to, and I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, because LA said we're not opening any place until there's a cure, which to me seems like such a crazy statement because Well, how many diseases do we have right now that don't have cures?
Right.
And
And
that's
not only that, but even
yikes.
if you just take it as a blanket statement, it's basically LA saying they're closed for the next year, year and a half, because that's the timetable we've gotten for vaccines. Now, are vaccines cures? I don't want to get into that debate either, but different areas are doing what's right for them,
Yep.
and just as different people have to do what's right for them.
Yep.
The other thing that's more pertinent perhaps to us is it looks like we're closer to sports perhaps starting. NBA could be opening practice facilities, it sounded like on Tuesday. Baseball's been the coin flip for most of the last couple of weeks. We're going to get into the debate of whether the players or the owners are right much later. But that has to give a glimmer of hope that at least it's being discussed at this point. The NHL to me looks like it's probably on the outs or starting very, very late. That's having a more difficult time. Is there a reason that you guys feel, and I'm not talking about the bureaucracy of a league, is there a reason that you guys feel that one sport has a more difficult time finding the right answer than another?
I think the NHL is because their players are spread all over the world. I mean, they're going to have to wrangle their way through visas and all that stuff to get guys even back. And yet, I think the NHL makes the most sense to start because playoffs are right. You can start playoffs immediately. So I don't know what Toph thinks, but that's my take on the NHL.
Yeah, that's a good point about the players being spread out all over the world. And also, it's the league that has the most teams in a different country as well, and the border being closed between the U.S. and Canada. That makes that a bigger, issue as well as far as travel. I know both the NBA and MLB have teams in Toronto, but that's just one city, and in theory, you could find a place to house one team, right? Whereas hockey's got a lot more, and a lot more. They're much of their fan base is Canadian as well. So trying to figure out the best way to get players to move around and try to figure that all out. It's interesting. I don't know how it's all going to shake out. The playoff thing, as you mentioned, Dave, is interesting as well, because what about those bubble teams like the Minnesota Wild that technically would be out of an 8-team playoff?
I was going to say, like ours?
Right now?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Brian, I think Topher and I solved the NHL though earlier, but pre-show, Topher and I were talking about how to salvage the NHL, and we think the answer is Super Rink.
Okay,
it's an interesting idea.
That's a very brief answer. Somebody elaborate.
The Blaine Super Rink's got 8 sheets of ice in it right now, so you could have games going all over the place. You could rattle through whatever's left of the regular season very quickly, in theory, and have them all housed in one area, specifically under one roof. And obviously, it would require, the biggest difficulty was that obviously they're not NHL buildings, so they don't have the technology like overhead goal cams and all that stuff for the replay. But if the NHL goes and invests that kind of stuff into one building, they could do it all right there in one spot. It'd be interesting to see. It'd be fun for sure.
What about, and this is kind of a simpleton's take, but does the fact that the NHL has, for lack of a better phrase, a bit of a disease history between the mumps spreading in a locker room and even the influenza that affected the high school level this year, does that cause them to be more hesitant because they've had some communicable health issues before, and this is obviously on a much larger scale?
I think they would be the most capable of locking down, though, as well. I think because of that experience, they can say, okay, this works and this doesn't.
It is interesting. And also, I've heard, the point get brought up. Most of the NHL locker rooms now, and obviously the Super Rink wouldn't have this in Blaine, but within like the minute at the Alexandria Center, they lock down the locker room and they crank the heat and they disinfect everything within that specific room just to try to disinfect the lockers as much as possible, as opposed to just, spraying Lysol or disinfectant around the place. They have actual built-in technology to try to disinfect the equipment and everything like that. So it's interesting to see. Hockey obviously does have a history with it. That's probably why they have that in the first place with the MUPs and the other stuff like that, because it's a sweaty, greasy, grimy sport, especially in the locker rooms when the guys have had this equipment sometimes for 20 years. Some guys are stuck with their shoulder pads or elbow pads or shin pads and things like that. So,
well, the fact that hockey locker room is basically a scent on its own.
Exactly, it's its own definitely its own scent, and trying to find the best way to socially distance players within a locker room is difficult. Hockey's got bigger rosters than basketball does too, right? So it's easier to spread 11 guys out in a big room than it is 25.
It is, but basketball's got the skin on skin contact as you play. If you look at the way the game is played, hockey's more physical, more padded up though too. Basketball would have a very difficult time. I mean, we talk about the NBA doesn't have enough defense. Maybe they were ahead of their time with social distancing because they don't guard each other well enough. But if you're going to implement it, basketball would have a really difficult time. Baseball, we've talked about. Patrick Royce, I think, did a column this week about where a catcher's going to go in proximities to umpires. People are touching the same ball. I don't know that any sport has a social distancing answer that is 100% preventative.
No, I agree with that, Brian. I think that what you'd have to do is you. I mean, I think the quarantine of teams have to be almost mandatory. You'd have to be able to ensure that the group that you have is healthy enough that if bodily contact happens, that that there's no COVID flying around the arena. You could do that. Topher made a good point earlier, prior to Brian arriving, is that if you had a big enough facility, you could have two NBA games going on at the same time. You could go, if you were at, say, US Bank, you could go sideline to sideline with two. I mean, ESPN and TNT would find that fascinating, I think. You could knock out a lot of games, and you could quarantine. And quarantine, I think, is the key to this. You're not mixing anybody in with the teams.
All right, so Dave Cook and Topher Davis are being sports versions of Dr. Anthony Fauci today, solving COVID little by little. I'm completely tongue in cheek as I say this, but one of the most entertaining pieces for me being a basketball public address announcer is the varying ways that a referee will report a foul. The way they'll describe it, the way they'll sometimes display it. I've had referees say contact to the head, that kind of thing. Can you imagine the first one where it says foul, 24 red, not COVID social distancing, got too close?
Yeah, well, we could rename that fall. It could be the Ricky Avis fall. No D, no D.
Yes, no D in Ricky Davis at all. So all of your solutions obviously come under the idea of fans not being there. Doesn't sound like whenever anything comes back that spectators are joining for the foreseeable future. So I only want to spend about 15 minutes today with an opening topic that is a little bit of pure fantasy because it's just if you could go to one game in each of the four major professional sports, where are you going? Who's playing? You only get to go to one. It's like they give you a day pass. And I'll let you guys pick which sport we start with.
Toph, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's a tough one, obviously, when you get things going. But for me, I'm going to start with baseball because I think that could be the first sport to really get going. It seems like they're making the most progress in getting things going. Plus, their season should have started by now, right? So I'm going to say, the obvious answer is target field, right? Just to get out there and spread things out. And honestly, baseball to me is the sport that, as a fan, lends itself to social distancing the most because it's easy to go spread out and wander around a little bit if you're not going to stuck in your seat necessarily. But I'm going to go with it'd be cool to get things going. We're heading out to New York. We're going to Citi Field to see the Mets and do some interleague play. Let's get the Mets and Twins. Let's go. I'm gonna go
All right,
crazy.
that works. That works. I'm happy with that answer, but I'm also a little disappointed because I knew because of how well I know you that you were going to Citi Field and the Mets were playing. But I just wanted you to pour a little bit of salt on that proverbial wound and say, we're going Mets Nationals. It's game one. It's DeGrom v. Scherzer. Let's go Mets go.
That would be a lot of fun too, especially to get the Nationals, knock them down a little bit more right away, right? Or get going right from the get go. So it would be fun. I'd love to go to that game with Dave too.
Right. Or I thought that it would just be the, Topher Davis best gift ever, Mets v. Kershaw, Mets Dodgers at Citi Field. But again, like your answer, Mets Twins localizes it too. That's well done.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to be wrong.
Absolutely. If you're going to a game in these times, you're already lucky as can be, assuming you're safe about it. Dave, what do you got? Are you still thinking? Do you want me to go?
No. I think there's two games that I wouldn't mind seeing. One of them is the obvious one. Let's bring the Cardinals to Target Field and play American League rules at Target Field. But the one that would be fun to watch, and I know it's a fantasy game, but how about Twins Yankees Colorado with balls that weren't in the humidifier, and let's just go. Let's have 18 to 16 games. We'll do a series. That'll be fun.
I like it. I thought maybe you were going to go Twins Astros outside Hartel DBJ where trash cans aplenty, and let's see who wins. But I like that. Twins and Yankees with the air up there in Coors Field. And let's just see. So, who do you want pitching that game? Because it has to be someone who has no pride in the fact that their ERA will balloon that day.
Big Mike. We'll see Big Mike on the mound. He'll be throwing 68 miles an hour and see what Aaron Judge can do with that. And yeah, I don't know the Yankees staff well enough. I certainly wouldn't want Tanaka because his ball would still move up in the air. So let's have somebody that throws mediocre heat and let's take if Sonny Gray was still there, it would be Sonny Gray.
There you go. There you go. A sunny day for sure. All right. So my answer would be the obvious. I will take Target Field. If it was a fantasy game like Dave put out there, let's put the Twins in Fenway against somebody not called the Red Sox because I've done that and I don't like feeling like I'm cheering for both sides. That's just not my thing. But I'm going to be a little bit too social perhaps because it's not a great rivalry. They play a lot. One team's been pretty bad, but I'm going to do Twins Tigers because then I could see them at Target Field. And by see them, I could see Joe Vavra. I could see Gardy. I enjoy those people. The game almost became a little bit secondary, so I'll do it that way. And because I love when the Twins win, they should beat the Tigers.
And
Right.
you could see your boy CJ Crone.
Exactly. Exactly. The best first baseman the Twins have had in at least 6 years.
And Jonathan Scoop.
Yes. Yes. Of course you'd say it that way. And that was on purpose. So that one I can't even poke fun at. All right. Baseball's out of the way per se, although we'll talk a lot about baseball throughout the day. Where do you want to go next? I assume with you guys, I should go to hockey next.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about hockey. It's tough because I'd want to be in the greatest environment, right? So I would probably and when I mean environment, I don't mean necessarily the city or anything, but put me in Winnipeg's facility and let's play whoever they think their greatest rivalry is. Maybe it's Toronto. And let's just do a whiteout with 16,000 people screaming like crazy. Just the atmosphere would be what I'd like to be involved in.
Yeah, it's interesting to, obviously for me, I think if I really had to choose, the Xcel Energy Center getting back going. And it's interesting too because that's the last place Brian and I saw. Well, Brian went to a basketball game afterwards too, but
I did.
The last place I went to a live sporting event was the state tournament.
Yes, the last professional venue was the state high school hockey tournament. So Topher and I would go back to the scene of the crime, the X, when we thought sports was, a given.
Yeah, I would love to get back to the X. That would make it feel like getting some more normalcy, obviously. But and I can't imagine what that place will be like when fans are allowed to back in because hockey is such a big deal as well in Minnesota. I mean, Winnipeg's you can't go wrong there. It's a great answer, especially getting to see Neil Pionk on the ice. But I'm going to say like with the Wild and the Blues, get them going a little bit, something like that. Try to build up that Central Division rivalry, but I just had enough of the Blackhawks, so I don't want to see them anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, Toph, who is the rivalry though? If you're Craig Leopold and you can pick any team, is it the Blues? Because the Blues hold nothing for me. It might be Dallas.
It's the Avs or Dallas. The Avs for history, Dallas for geography and stealing our team.
I might throw Winnipeg in there too, a little bit too, honestly. Their geography, they're close to the Xcel Energy Center, relatively speaking, and as well as when they met in the playoffs a few years ago, it didn't go very well for the Minnesota Wild. So I think there's some bad blood starting to build there as well.
I can only imagine, as Topher mentioned, Neil Pionk, being that he played for Hermantown and UMD, how big of a factor that was in Dave's wanting to go to Winnipeg. Somehow I just don't see it. However, I'm taking the Wild as part of my game too, but I'm putting the Wild in Vegas. Tim Mattson sold me on the atmosphere there. And I'll tell you what, Dave said atmosphere and environment doesn't mean the city, and I get it. It's more about the venue. Well, for me, this is win-win. The venue's been said to be pretty cool. The city is pretty dang cool. I'm going to fail social distancing after the game in Vegas, lining up at a casino, but just bring me there. And pro hockey, I'll just let the cat out of the bag. Doesn't mean as much to me. So I'm going to have fun at the game, and I'm going to have fun when I'm done, too.
Yeah, you'll be not just the game, but the games after.
Yes, I'll have money on the game that I'm watching.
And you're going to play roulette with your health anyway, so you may as well play actual roulette.
Right. Go big or go home. No question about it. NBA, Dave, go first.
That's the one that's the hardest one of the whole group. For me personally, because is it an old rivalry? Is it like I'm sure you're gonna say Lakers Celtics, or is it something newer? Is it Houston and pick your poison? So if I'm gonna watch that, I'm gonna want a team that I really do care about, and I'd like to watch the Wolves. And I'm going to take Houston because Houston is the team that I like to watch the most as far as the style of basketball, even though that game probably wouldn't even be on TNT.
But see, that's why you got to go. If it's not televised, you got to be there. Now, Topher, these are current rosters, current state of the game, so you can't use, the 04 Western Conference Finals are off the table, which I know
That's
is
the only game I've ever been to.
Right, that's your elite status in NBA watching.
Absolutely.
So where's the second voyage going to take you?
Okay. Well, current rosters and everything. Obviously, it'd be fun to see Cat, and hopefully this little time off's allowed him to get healthy so he can be playing again when this thing gets rolling again. But right now, honestly, at this point in the NBA season, I might go Clippers Lakers at Staples Center. Get to Los Angeles. What, did I steal yours, Brian?
Yeah, no, I thought there was no way that we'd be the same on this. That's exactly what I'm going to do too.
Yeah, let me get out there. The clip show's starting to pick things up a little bit. Lakers still got LeBron. I mean, I'm a big fan of Southern California, and the Staples Center is a pretty fun place to be. So why not? Let's go for that.
All right, so I'll shake mine up a little bit. Man, I thought with the amount that I have passion for basketball and the amount that Topher usually mocks it, that there's no way that we would intersect here. Yet I thought, I love the Celtics, but I don't necessarily need to see them. I'd like to go to Boston. You guys expect me to go to Boston for anything else that I do. So, put the game at the TD Garden, but the TD Garden isn't the Garden. But I want to see LA versus LA. I'm not a LeBron guy. The Clippers have been the, redheaded stepchild of the NBA for how long? Now they're pretty good. They got Kawhi, etc. Let's play. I want to see that game too. I can't believe we mirrored each other on that one.
See, I can understand Topher's, but I'm shocked you didn't go Toronto, Indianapolis at Indy, Brian. I thought that was, the basketball purist might want to see that.
Well, yes, Market Square Arena was a lovely place back in the day, but unless Reggie Miller and Rick Smits are coming back, I'm not rushing out to see a Pacers game. And Toronto doesn't have Kawhi anymore. I don't need to meet Drake that badly, so I'm not going to a Raptors game either.
The Sabonis Van Fleet, crashing, I thought maybe that would be your thing.
Maybe. If we could have gone historical rosters, this would be completely different. I mean, it would have been Lakers Celtics, and it would have been, depending upon what side of the rivalry you were on, anything 85 to 87. Yep. The 97, 98 Bulls would have showed up. But this is current state of affairs.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's I get the Los Angeles versus Los Angeles spin. I just, it's that Houston team I like so much. So the Timberwolves were the first team that came to mind, but it might be Houston, Miami just to go beat Jimmy Butler.
All right. So the NFL, that should, knock on something, happen on time. It probably won't happen with fans. If it did, and I'll throw a bonus, we can do college football after this, but we got 3 minutes to fit both in before our first guest. But NFL, where are you going? Who are you watching? Dave.
I can't stand to watch the Vikings. I don't want to watch them lose, so I'm watching Baltimore, New Orleans in New Orleans.
Yeah, I'm going to, obviously the Vikings, seeing a Vikings-Packers game at the bank or something would be pretty sweet. But I'm going to go with, in Denver, Broncos-Chiefs at Mile High.
All right, so Topher and I only mirrored each other halfway here. One of the teams that he's got in his game, I've got in mine too. COVID-19 is a health risk enough. So I'm not going to a Vikings game to double that health risk because you guys know how I watch them play anyway. So I'm not watching them in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to Tampa. I'm going to Tampa Bay to watch the Bucs and the Chiefs. The best quarterback ever against the best quarterback now. I just want to watch that.
That'd be a fun game. I think Tampa's going to be special this year. Yeah.
Well, you should, because that's all we've been told. I mean, if they're not, it's going to be more misleading than any of the COVID press conferences, because that's all we've been told is how good they're going to be.
University of Minnesota South, baby.
That is a good reason to cheer for them. There's a lot of different reasons for proven players, but Tampa's draft class, Minnesotans are on the bandwagon without a doubt. So that segues nicely to the University of Minnesota. If we do Division I football, because we work various levels of football besides that, Division I football, you guys love it. I'm learning. Where are you guys going?
I'll let Toph go first here.
For me, obviously, it's going down to Tallahassee, seeing Florida State play in the Doak. and probably taking on the Gators.
Brian, I'm going to Austin, Texas, and I'm going to watch Oklahoma battle Texas in Texas. I think that would be a great first college football game to go to.
I'm going to watch Florida play Notre Dame, but I'm going to touchdown Jesus. But maybe I'm going to hell because I'm probably rooting for whoever Notre Dame is playing, even though Topher wouldn't like the fact that I'd be rooting for Florida in that scenario. But it is what it is. I knew Florida State would be represented, so I had to go somewhere else. Maybe I'll go Bama Notre Dame just to see Saban. Does that work?
That's crazy.
That
there
works.
you go. It's better than Florida.
All right.
So Saban shouldn't play Notre Dame, right? Because he doesn't like to play good teams until
there you go. There you go. So Jen Walter is here. We've got a lot of things to talk to her about. Jen, if you want to chime in on what we were just discussing, we're doing a hypothetical of if they let fans into one game this year, where are you going? Who are you watching? We were specific to college football when you jumped in. I'll let you pick a sport, pick a matchup if you got one.
I got nothing. There's I want to go watch my own team play.
That's probably the best answer you could give. I think there are a lot of people in Duluth that probably agree with you. Let's start there. It's probably an overplayed question, but take me through the moment that you knew the season wasn't going to be. What was that like?
Oh, it's funny. It was about a 24-hour period, and actually probably about a 4-hour period where it went from it's a possibility that we might not play to we're not going to play. We actually were flying back from Florida, and when we had all types of delays on the way out of Orlando, but when we got into Minneapolis, one of my players said, "Coach, they just canceled the Pac-12." And I'm like, what? I'm like, seriously? And at that time, I'm like, well, D1 softball is pretty big time. They have a lot of fans, and so I figured that was kind of the why of that. And so I was driving in the van home with some of the players, and probably about Hinckley, one of the players said, "Coach, just says on Twitter the NCAA canceled our spring sport championships." Well, and at that point, I was going, okay, this is serious. We had a conference call with the coaches and our athletic director, Josh, and I was on that on the way home. And it was basically in that phone call where he said, it's not finalized, but it looks like the NSIC is at least going to postpone the season until March 31st. So by the time I got back to my office at about 5:30, 6 o'clock, that's when we found out for sure. And then 6:30 is when I told our players. So
wow, that is a very detailed timeline. What was the emotion like for you? Because there are players to tell regardless of the age, but the first thing you think of is seniors are done. What was that like?
We weren't even at that point yet. I mean, it was just, I think we were all in shock. It was just I had probably 5 or 6 of the players in my office that had rode back with me, and the rest of them we had on video conferencing. That was before Zoom. So we were trying to Facebook Live it. And it was just, the biggest thing there was just telling them, hey, there's no championship and we're delayed until March 31st. We can keep our fingers crossed. At that point, nobody knew what the extent of this was. So, we were kind of holding on to that little bit of hope there. So we didn't really talk a lot about the seniors. We just talked about being safe, staying optimistic, and then taking it one day at a time.
So we're talking with Jen Walter, UMD women's softball coach. Dave, I look like you're chomping at the bit to get involved here. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to actually ask a similar question because earlier in the year, we had seen, kind of the behind the scene picture of when St. Cloud State pulled their football program, and the emotion that went through that room. And I was wondering, as Brian asked, what it was like when you told your team that, listen, we're done for the year, and the emotion that may have come through.
Well, I mean, there were tears. I mean, that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done is tell a team we're done. we had, we were just getting ready to start NSIC play. We all excited. This is a really close knit group. We only had 14 players, so everybody was really close. Really enjoyed being around each other. So yeah, there's a lot of tears. And there's nothing you can say. I can just remember at one point almost chuckling to myself, to be honest with you, as we're on the phone, and all we can do is hear people crying. Nobody had anything to say. Yeah. There's nothing to say. It's just, somehow trying to be with each other in that moment when you know that the season is lost.
So Jen, one of the things that we've talked about over the past couple of weeks is those teams that have just stopped, right? We're talking about like Duluth Marshall's women's basketball team, who we will always think that's the team that would have won the state tournament, right? Because they were on a roll, so on and so forth. So what would your team have done? How was your team? Where was it heading? What would that season have played out like?
Well, clearly we would have won the national. We would have won the national championship.
That away, Jen. Good.
Obviously, we're already getting the banner hanging ceremony ready. Next spring, that's what we're starting with.
Get that flag up the pole, man.
Right.
Here's the thing about this is it is horrible that some of our seniors played their last game.
Yeah.
It is horrible that this team will never be together again. But as is in everything, and I'm not the most optimistic person. However, I can be, and I've found so many silver linings in this. And I think we will remember this year, these moments, more so than any other year, because everybody, we talk about going through adversity a lot. But sometimes when you go through adversity, not everybody shares the same feelings of it, because they have different perspectives on that. We had the shared experience of the exact same thing. Everybody went through, everybody had the same loss. And I think that really brought everybody together. And in talking to our players here since then, it's been 2 months now, they've been able to share moments with each other since then that they probably wouldn't have shared had it not been for this. I believe that they've gotten closer, and there's a deeper bond that they have that they would not have experienced. And for me, that's really cool, because we're out there playing games, but in the long run, it's really about relationships. And I really feel like the relationships that we have developed in the last 2 months have been more meaningful than had this not happened, to be honest.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you, Jen. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I believe that too. I mean, I'm not like, I've talked to, we got a house full of kids that, live together. And so they've been up in Duluth. So they've been able to, really spend some time together without softball, which is something they've never done before. So when you get away from the element that brings you together, you learn a lot more about people, and that's what really helps develop those relationships. So I think, I think there's something that comes out of everything if you look for it, and so it's kind of a cool thing, I think.
Yeah, and Coach Walter, obviously, thank you very much for that answer. It was really cool to see the way the team's been developing and things like that. Now, since, without going forward right now, are you working on is there any like workouts that you have putting the team through? Are you, Zoom calls? Are you meeting together still as a team to get things going? How are you making sure your players are staying in shape, I guess, and working towards developing for the future?
Yes, we have, for the first probably 6 weeks, up until finals and whatnot, we met weekly. They actually requested doing workouts. So we had our strength guy, come on and put them through, half-hour workouts twice a week together through Zoom. But the hard thing about this is, what are we staying in shape for? I mean, I
Yeah.
probably sound like everybody's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
But you know what? You're asking the questions that I think too many people are afraid to ask. I appreciate that because there is a silver lining. We hope eventually there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But when? I mean, what are we
That,
doing this for? I think it's crossed a lot of people's mind.
that even in the perfect world, we're not going to start practicing until September. So why in April and May what do we need to do? And what can we do? Yeah, we can keep our skills sharp, but I've always believed that we also need time away from our game. I don't want players, well, I don't require players to play 24/7. If they do because they want to. That's their choice. I like to have players that are invested in the game, and I believe that they are. But I want them to I will support them, but I want them to do that on their own time. So that's been the hard thing, is that what do you have them do in this time? And we did the workouts, I think mostly not so much for the workout, just so that that was our way of being together, and we had a once a week Zoom meeting. So 3 times a week we were together. And that was enjoyable. But it certainly wasn't, did it make us a better softball player? Probably not. And am I okay with that? Yeah, probably. That's all right.
Absolutely. I appreciate the way that you're answering because it is very, cut and dry. It is a good point that you're making. What about, we've talked a lot about the team that you have. What about the team that you might be preparing to have? Spring sports at the high school level didn't start. How do you handle recruits that senior season might have been important for? What are you telling them to do?
Yeah. Well, they didn't get to play at all. So, and they didn't get anything. They didn't get their prom as much as big deal in my mind, but for them it is. So I can appreciate that. They didn't get their graduation. They didn't get their last month of their senior year, where they're even our seniors. It's the same thing. I had one of my seniors hand in their final paper, after 5 years, and there was nobody to celebrate with.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going out and having a drink with your classroom buddies that you've had class with for 4 or 5 years. The same thing for the high school kids. So, I've talked with them a couple of times now, just to let them know that, hey, we're here. And the biggest thing we're trying to do right now is just get them. We've got 10 freshmen coming in. We'll have 11 returners. So, 50% of our team is freshmen.
Wow.
With them not having a senior season, and who knows what's going to happen this summer. That's going to be delayed for sure. And it's going to be, they're not going to play as many games. So my goal has been to get those 10 to, kind of onboarding them into the Bulldog program. How can we make this an easy transition? It's already a hard transition going from a high school senior to a college freshman. There's so many things involved in that. We want to make softball their safe zone. We want them to know all of our players and to help start developing that relationship with them this summer, so that when they get to school, if they get to school, that's the question. When they get to school, when they get into the classroom, or even if it's via video conferencing or whatnot, they have their support system already in place. They don't have to get to know their teammates because they already know them. So that's primarily my goal is to get them kind of that safe zone, which is softball, so that, when and if we get back, that will be one less thing that they have to stress out about. There's going to be enough stressor.
So, Coach, I'm far from Shakespeare, but it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, right? Your team got started, high school didn't. Is it better to get a taste of how good you might have been, or never know what you were missing? Because high school kids didn't know.
Well, I certainly am glad we got to play our 21 games. And the thing is that nobody knows how anything would have played out.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the beauty in it. We all can think we were going to win the conference, we were going to win the
Yep.
national championship, and nobody can tell you you're wrong.
Right.
Everybody won.
Yeah.
That's the millennial way. Everybody truly gets that trophy this year, right?
Well, I think that when your team is sitting around in 10 years around a table having that drink, that's going to be the conversation. You know, we were going to go places. I mean, that's to make the silver lining out of this. I think you said it right a couple of minutes ago. These guys have a different kind of relationship, and that thought process will always be there in a positive way.
Absolutely. I mean, when we get through this, we're going to have nothing but great memories. You know, you still have the pain of not playing. That'll go away. It's everything else that we'll be able to come back and really appreciate, that we probably wouldn't have appreciated as much in the past.
I wonder if your freshmen are going to come in with that mindset too, because they kind of had it taken away from them. It's going to matter more.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I can't wait to get them back. And you know, it really has kind of changed. It kind of reminds me of my first year when I was at UMD. You know, my goal when I came into that, was, you know, I'm going to teach you everything I know about softball, and I want you to leave having a great experience. That's my goal. The problem with that is, as a human being, when you start playing games, then winning starts clouding the picture, because you have to be able to do that, but you start losing perspective. And so this has really kind of brought me back to that mindset. And I constantly have to bring myself back to that mindset of, hey, let's give them a great experience, teach them everything we know about the game and about life and dealing with people, and everything will take care of itself. I mean, if you're good enough to win, you'll win, right? But you can always have a great experience.
So let's move forward, because we have to. You keep saying we will get through this, and I certainly hope you're right. This is a very open discussion topic. What do you envision a new normal even looking like, whether it's on the field, on the recruiting trail, what have you? What are you trying to prepare for? Because again, there's the almighty nobody knows what we're really supposed to do.
Well, what it talks about when, I mean, normal in a couple of years, I think we're going to be back to what we're doing. I think I don't think I'm going to be wearing a face mask the rest of my life, to be honest with you.
Well, if you're coaching third, I think you should, but different kind of face mask.
Right. You know, I don't know. You know, one of the things I've had to think about here, just a small thing, is that, you know, when we get done with the game, like, you know, everybody goes through and slaps hands, right? Well, I can't stand that. I just think that, like, this is a meaningful act where you just played a game against an opponent that you couldn't play without them. And the game of softball, which we love, you know, it's an act of sportsmanship, and yet we don't even take the time to look somebody in the eye. So what we do is we actually shake hands, look them in the eye, shake hands, right? That's kind of been a staple of what we do. I'm guessing that's going to go away. Things like that are going to go away. So what do we replace that with? You know, how do we still play this game with the respect that we have for it, and show our opponents that we appreciate that, or the officials, or heaven forbid. But, you know, what's the new normal? I don't know. I just can't imagine standing in the outfield having to wear a face mask.
Right. Well, it kind of gives new meaning to robbing a home run, if you really have the robber look going with the face mask, maybe. But you mentioned the officials, heaven forbid. Wait a minute, let's go that direction. Because at the high school level, where I get to see you the most, you are an official. Take that and put that hat on for a moment. What's that new normal going to be like? Because I think it's going to be hard for you guys as officials too.
Well, it's hard to blow a whistle with a mask, is it not?
It is. It is. That's step one.
You know, to be honest with you, Brian, I have not really thought a whole lot about that. I think the contact sports are probably going to have some more challenges that they're going to have to deal with. You know, officials, I don't know. It's definitely some challenges. I don't have any answers. Haven't even thought about that. That's way down the road for me.
See, that's just it to me, though. At some point, we have to at least be willing to pretend to be normal, because with the adjustments that have to be made, a lot of these games you can't play. I mean, basketball, hockey snobs will argue it's not physical, but it's skin on skin. If you're social distancing, your coach is riding you because you're not playing defense. I'm tongue in cheek, but I'm not. How do you fix this?
I'm not the one to ask. That's the thing. That's the thing. And how much do you how safe can you be? How safe should you be? I don't have those answers. I have my opinions, but I don't have the answers. And I'm glad that I'm not in a position to make those decisions, because they're hard. And whatever decision you make, somebody's not going to agree with you, and it's probably going to be right. Yeah. You're both right and you're both wrong. So it's a matter of how do we move forward? That's the question. I don't have the answer. Now you guys probably have discussed this multiple times.
Wow, just because we've discussed it doesn't mean we've come up with an answer. I think we've come up with 7 or 8 different ones, and they all contradict the first 6 or 7. So we're going in circles.
Jen knows us well enough to say, and whatever solution you guys have, I know it's kind of dumb.
I think she very kindly said, I know all 3 of you, and all 3 of you have been known to be long-winded before, so I'm sure at some point you came up with something worth it. Topher, you look ready to jump in. Go ahead. The water's warm.
Well, I'm just wondering, Jen, have you been in contact within the athletic department, other coaches, about how to get through this time like that? Or are there any coaches outside of UMD that you've had discussions with, maybe within conference or anything like that, about how they're handling the situation with their teams?
Yeah, I mean, our head coaches at UMD, we meet weekly with Josh and the rest of the administration, but it's not really, it's more of a matter of here's what's happening. Here's where we're at in the climate. Here are the concerns we have. It's, here's the thing. I am not in a position to make any decisions. Mm-hmm. If somebody asks me my opinion, I will give them my thoughts. But I'm not really one to worry about how this is all going to play out, because I don't have any control over that. If I've talked to a few of the coaches in our conference for softball. But even then, there's just so much speculation, and I've offered my opinions on playing season and all this stuff, but I'm not a decision maker, so I don't really want to. It's not worth my time.
Sure. I'd be interested to know, though, Jen, what might be the best piece of advice you've given or received during this time. If it's obviously not an answer, but somebody's come to you and said, Jen, I'm at a loss here. What kind of advice do you give?
I think it took me about a week to 10 days to kind of wrap my head around everything. And what it's come down to me is, one thing that we all want more of, aside from money, is time, right? We all need more time to do all these things. We've been afforded more time. Mm-hmm. When I'm not, I haven't had practice. I haven't had games. I haven't had to travel. There's a lot of things I haven't been able to or had to do because it was taken away. So that gave me extra time. So what am I doing with my time? And there's a lot of things that I've wanted to do that I've been able to dive into, and help prepare myself and prepare the program for when we do start up. So to me, I can focus on what was taken away, but I can't change that. Mm-hmm. I can focus on what was given me, which is time, and I can absolutely take advantage of that. So I think for me, that was the thing that helped me really get through this. I've had colleagues that, I had a friend that coaches down in the cities, and she's like, Jen, I've cried every day here now for the last 2 weeks, and I'm like, that's okay, that's part of it. But we have time. You got time to do those things that you've never had time to do. So there's, I'd hate to get, like I said, I'd hate to get to the end of May and be mad that I didn't get these things done.
Jen, you mentioned time. We got about 5 minutes left, but you also mentioned money. So I don't want to be too presumptuous and talk about, well, she's a softball coach, so she loves Major League Baseball. But let's say for a minute that you do, and I don't know that. You can correct me or you can agree with me. But money is a big topic in if MLB gets going right now. Players versus owners. Both are not hurting for money, but both are hurting on their opinion on this. Do you have a take on that? And I'm just asking for your opinion, which you said I could do.
Yes, you can. Well, I was just listening to the radio this morning, and somebody was saying this is America's pastime, and we need to get back. And I'm not that person. I'm like, there are so many other things that are more important than whether baseball and hockey and basketball and football play, professionally. And I get that this is multi-billion-dollar business, but for me, if there's not another game until September, October, I'm okay with that. I'm not gonna. My life isn't gonna be any less rewarding if I don't watch a baseball game this summer. Those guys are gonna be fine. They're all gonna be just fine, or they're gonna suffer like the rest of us are suffering, and why shouldn't they?
Yeah, that's probably okay too.
I don't have sympathy. I mean, I get where, I don't get it. I don't make their money. I can't even pretend to get.
Right. Jenna, can I just tell you this? I love the blunt nature of your answers. You can come back any week that you want. This is what we need.
Well, that's what you get when you talk to me. So you should have known that coming in.
I was going to say, I didn't meet you this week. I was prepared for that. I want to close and have you talk about two guys that I consider legends. One with the Bulldogs just left. Bob Nygaard, what can you say? That's going to be my question. What can you say about him, and what did he do for you in your time at UMD?
Well, I mean, Bob is, I've known Bob well before I was at UMD. I knew him as an official. Back in the day when I was at Scholastica, believe it or not, I was the SID for a few years. So I believe I interacted with him there, but I mean, he's just a legend in our SID department, and he's always had some great people that have worked he's mentored some interns along the way. I mostly dealt with the interns, but interns aren't good interns without great leadership, and I think that's kind of where Bob stepped in and allowed them to do the things that they wanted to do. And so we were always very well supported from the SID department. And I think that goes kudos to Bob. And so, and he's a legend around there. And without someone like that to get the information out, especially for sports like this, we're not on the front page every day. But we're there, and we're important enough. And he is a big part of that.
Absolutely. So the last legend I want you to talk about, I appreciate you slumming with broadcasters like me, Dave Cook, and Topher Davis, but broadcasting legends, is there a bigger one than your dad? Please give him our best and talk about how good he is and tips we could probably take from him. He mentored me back in the early 2000s.
Yep.
My dad. My dad's saying is, by the inch, it's a cinch. By the mile, it's a trial. And he has said that for as long as I can remember. And it makes, I think in times like this, it really makes a lot of sense. It's like, don't let something get bigger than it is. Take things one day at a time. I've learned to be very comfortable in this environment, and enjoyed it. And I learned a lot of that from my dad. Some of my favorite interviews that I've done have been with my dad as the guy asking the questions, because I always, I've always felt that he has, like, I've been interviewed a fair amount of times, and sometimes you just get the stock questions that, are like, I want something. I want something that digs in a little bit, and I feel like my dad always was really good at kind of getting beyond just the basic stuff for us to talk about, because most coaches do like to talk about their game. So yeah, my dad is he's been our best supporter. He loves Bulldog anything. And when
Yes, he does.
yeah, and when I moved over to UMD, both my mom and my dad were ecstatic, and so just to give them,
Can I just tell you that Dave Cook may not have been? He's got Saints up in his backdrop there. Dave Cook may not have been. He still roots for you, but he's not a dog guy.
Jen knows I root hard for Jen.
Yeah,
for Jen, yes. For UMD, yeah. I'm not going to alienate you like that.
I still, the Saints are still, I was there for 16 years, so obviously the Saints are a big part of it. That's a big reason why I think I had the opportunity to move on to UMD. So
that Hall of Fame banquet that we went to this fall, Jen, that team that you had and the things that you said about them that was a lot of fun this fall.
Yes, it was. That was quite a crew we had there. It was a lot of fun.
No question about that. Yes.
So, Brian, here's the thing. If I'm a parent and I have a daughter who's interested in softball at all, is there a better person to play for than Jen? And Jen, I don't even need your comment here. I just think that listen to the way she talks to us and how she would talk to her players. I can't imagine after watching this wanting to go anywhere else.
Right. We just helped in this Zoom and technological world. We just made you a recruiting video. Now, I have to be careful. I know you don't want Jen's opinion, and Dave, you phrased it like you wanted mine. I have to be careful because I got a hunch that Riley Dawson will watch this at some point. And I already picked my CSS quarantine house on Twitter yesterday, and Riley wasn't in it, and she was all over me for not picking that one. So I'm not about to go against her today either.
Which one were you in? I picked two. I want to be in there with David Staniger.
Well, see, I took the brown noser way out. I was in 3 with all the admin folks who write my checks at the College of St. Scholastica. It was Diedrich, it was Riles, it was Jesse, it was those guys, and then I got Chad Somala doing broadcast stories. Truthfully, you couldn't go wrong. I think that's a fact.
Well, absolutely, it was a tough choice, but David Staniger, hands down. I'll spend my time. That guy is one of the funniest guys I know.
No question about it. He was the first in-house guest we ever had. Hopefully we get back in-house again. Hopefully we see you on a court, a diamond, anywhere. This was awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's UMD softball coach Jen Walter. We'll be back with hour number 2 very shortly. Tyler George joins us next. Stay right here.